So as per usual, we get a big tier shift. We gotta cover new VR update. We got a huge slate of changes here, as you see a lot of Pokemon dropping, which kind of interesting, and I want to talk about that especially because I think we are seeing that transition period. We didn't get a ton of Pokemon from Pokemon Home. You know, this is basically everything we got, and an add-on Calyrex. And I guess some Pokemon will be banned, but even still, you see the meta had a huge shakeup, so we're going to talk about that. Of course, before we get into that, I do want to remind everyone, if you are a new viewer or a returning viewer that just hasn't subscribed yet, you should subscribe. You know what? It takes no time. It's free. You support me for free. It's just all around a lovely thing to do. And it works to keep me motivated to keep uploading daily for y'all. Now let's get into it. So, I'm going to cover, of course, the new Pokemon first, talk about where they've fallen in the metagame and whatnot, and as per previous videos, sometimes I just don't have anything to say about Pokemon, especially once we're down, like, here. So, at a point, you'll see me start maybe getting a little rambly, but hey, y'all like that, I know. So, Abomasnow, already being put in A rank, and you'll see that's kind of a trend with these new ice types, they're really good. Abomasnow just kind of doesn't have a ton of Pokemon that want to consistently switch into it, because, yeah, it turns out, when you don't have a Steel type, it's very hard to pivot into Ice Grass coverage. If we're thinking of Pokemon that switch into, say, special sets, you're probably just going to reference generic special walls. 'Cause, again, if you're talking Steel types, there's Berserker, and then, like, Magneton, which, okay, not awful, but not great either. So you're looking at maybe Assault Vest Electros, you're looking at maybe Articuno even, you're looking at Blissey, you're looking at maybe a Coiled Dunsparce, because those are going to have a lot of special bulk. And yeah, Abomasnow, it can really do some damage to these Pokemon. Now, Articuno and Blissey are kind of harder to beat down, of course, because they've got reliable recovery and are just a bit better, I would say, in terms of blanket special walls compared to Dodon. But Specs of Abomasnow kind of changes it a bit. It's not a set you see a ton, but in my experience, it's probably one of the best sets on it. It's just so good at brute forcing past some of these other options and really limiting your defensive counterplay to, say, what I mentioned, Articuno and Blissey. Because Articuno's got pressure, you can always switch in and then just roost it off, and you're going to make Abomasnow run through that Blizzard power point real quick, and you can, of course, have Hurricane if you want to run it, to just bonk little tree on top of the head. And that doesn't really stop there with what Abomasnow can do itself. Of course, Boots or Eject Pack are perfectly good options on Wall Breaker sets. Sword Stance is something very, very usable. Nice kind of lure as well to maybe, like we were mentioning, you know, a Blissey or Assault Vest Electros that may switch in, predicting you to throw off a Blizzard. And then, oh, you danced in front of it, and now you are looking to one-shot what's in front of you. Even Aurora Veil, I believe, is allowed in our tier still. I should probably know whether or not it is, but... Oh, it is. Okay, I remember. So, Aurora Veil, good move on Abomasnow. Even with Light Clay's ban, it's still perfectly usable because you set up your Veil, and maybe just have Eject Pack, and you Leaf Storm on out. Or like we were talking about yesterday with Grimmsnarl running Eject Button on a dual screen set, you could do the same thing with Abomasnow. Little bit less effective because Abomasnow is not too fast, so unlike Grimm, which can guarantee a screen before it gets hit, Abomasnow may be taking that hit first if you're not careful, and you don't want to waste an eject button like that. Now, Articuno being ranked an A+ might be shocking to a lot of y'all. I think, especially what, you know, in reference to the live I did where I'm like, you know, it got nerfed, it lost all of its good moves. Why is it an A+ still? Well, turns out Articuno's still really, really good. Heavy-duty boots, of course, are a big factor playing into this because you don't have to worry about the biggest issue Articuno has had historically, that huge Stealth Rock weakness. And a big benefit for it too this generation, because we had the move pool snaps, it actually worked a bit in his favor too, because knockoff distribution is a lot lower. And while I'm not too sure of many Pokemon Articuno would be switching into to take a knockoff, the fact that there are fewer anyway, I mean, we can even just look here, like Sableye still has it, but Alolan Persian, for example, that is not what I meant to do. Alolan Persian, for example, all the way up here, does not have it. And Alolan Persian I could see you maybe switching into if you're just trying to come in on like a utility move of it, like Taunt, for example. So that is nice. It means your boots aren't as great a risk of being removed. There's just a lot more staying power as a result. And then if you think about a lot of the mons that are good right now, there's a lot of bulky setup sweepers. Articuno's combination of pressure and haze is really, really good for stalling those out and preventing them from running down your team. We're just seeing a lot of people run random options, frankly, on it. I've seen most generally Freeze Dry plus U-Turn plus Roost are almost always on the set. And then the last move could be Ice Beam, it could be Hurricane, it could be Haze, it could be Protect even, we've seen, because, again, pressure plays into it. Although I believe if you attack on a Protect, it still doesn't activate pressure, but not too important. Also, just a very nice scouting move against choice item users, like, say, a Scarf Rotom if you need to scout around it, or just to scout out Terra. You know, you don't want to get caught by something like, I don't know, a nasty plot Alolan version with Terra Electric Thunderbolt, for example. So, all around, just really, really surprisingly great Pokemon. Sorry, but not sorry to pee you. We might be adopting Articuno soon. Blissey in A rank. I don't think it's this good, but Blissey's a fat POS. It's really, really, really hard to take down, and Calm Mind sets are actually really, really potent, so I'm fine with A. I voted an A-, just to put it in perspective, but it is quite consistent in what it needs to do. It is chancy, but a little bit better. I was talking about it in VR chat a few days ago, because we had some people saying, oh, well, why is, I was telling people, why are we ranking Chansey still, by the way, guys? It is worse than Blissey. And one of our VR members was like, technically Chansey's bulkier, and I said, no! Because guess what? Hit the calc. Sandaconda Earthquake versus Blissey. Yeah, it does 7% more, but guess what? I got the Tims. So technically Chansey took 5% more if Stealth Rock are up. And it only gets worse because we have a lot of Spikers too. So, like I had mentioned when we originally got Blissey, that's the huge benefit to it over Chansey. In a Hazards-dominant generation, Hazards-dominant metagame, being able to run heavy-duty boots is such a huge benefit. And because Blissey's not reliant on boots necessarily for its bulk, like Chansey is on a Violite, if you do accidentally, suffer from item disruption, I don't know how the hell you would with either of these Pokemon, but if you do, well, hey, you still got a ton of bulk for Blissey. Chansey, not so clear anymore. We got the Binker in B+, not B+, B-. Hasn't seen a ton of use yet, but on paper, it's a, Fairy type. It has both Stealth Rock and Spike. Iron Defense Body Press stuff is pretty promising. It's another Fire Resistance as well, which Inu has kind of not had great defensive ones this gen. It's overall a kind of nice option. And, I mean, in terms of new drops, it helps against both Grim and Tauros. It technically checks Scyther as well, if we want to reference old Pokemon. I think it's a little underexplored. I don't know what the potential of it is relative to what it is doing in PU, where it's an absolute menace to society. But I do think there is some long-term hope for the little Binker. Then we get the Ditto. It's in B- because Stall is not too bad right now, so basically it's representative of where Stall is. That's all I have to say about this mon. Dugtrio Lola ranked in C. I don't know why. Next mon. I don't know, bro. It's kind of fast and can set Stealth Rock in the lead slot. That's really all I can tell you. I've never used this Pokemon, and I'm unlikely to ever try it, because I don't see a reason to use it over Froslass. Our next mon, which is an incredible Spiker for offense, incredible Spiker for balance, because it's also just generally fast. Will-O-Wisp plus Taunt, both really cool disruption moves you can have. And I mean, Ice Ghost coverage even not too bad, so you're pretty decent at making offensive progress. Unless you run into like a Blissey, you're probably never going to be completely dead weight, because even against Pokemon like, Assault Vest Eel or Coiled to Dunsparce, as we mentioned earlier, you can still get a Willow off on them, and burning them's really, really useful. And now we got the two stupid Terra abusers. Both of these mons, Mesprit and Grimmsnarl, are probably the best we have at exploiting the new mechanic. I did a whole Grimmsnarl video yesterday. I'm not going to talk about it more right now. Just go watch that video if you haven't already. Go watch it. It's a good video. But TLDR, Terra Steel Grimm on bulk up sets, Terra Dark Grimm on like choice band sets. Very, very strong, very, very good Pokemon. Mesprit, all the way up in S-. There's more to it obviously than Terra. If you've been around NU since, like, Generation 6, you'll know Mesprit is very capable of running a wide variety of sets. You got, like, Choice Specs, you got Choice Scarf, you got those defensive utility sets with Stealth Rock. You've had setup sets historically. Used to be Calm Mind, and nowadays more so you see Nasty Plot, on at least offensive Mesprit. But hey, it still has Calm Mind, and that's really good because of those stored power sets with Terra Fairy Draining Kiss. Really nice bulky setup sweeper. Overall, it just does anything you want for a team. And I would definitely say that it is living up to the hype that I bestowed upon it back before it actually dropped to NU. So, definitely use this Pokemon. Use it. Every team. I don't care if it doesn't fit. Use it anyway. Find a way to make it fit. Alolan Persian in B, it's kind of bad. I don't know. I thought the loss of Knockoff wouldn't be that huge, but frankly, it kind of is feeling impactful. Because Knockoff on this fast, fat cat was so useful. And now I feel like a lot of your progress making is more so just you parting shot spamming. And it doesn't feel like there's as many physical sweepers that this mon actually is useful for keeping in check compared to last gen. Like, if you remember Alolan Persian in NU last gen, a big part of its appeal was that it could check the Sylvallies, back when there were a lot more Sylvallies that were prevalent. And we also had a lot more ghost types. Like, we went through a whole meta where ghost types were just reigning supreme. I think this was a bit before the DLC 2 shifts, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was even before DLC 1. Kind of hard to remember at this point. But a lot of our sweepers now, I feel, are more specially oriented. And so it just doesn't feel as useful from that perspective either. And of course, it's a dark type in a meta where we have like 6 viable dark types. So it's gonna be a little hard to fit on a team. It's still good. I think Nasty Plot's a joke of a set, but it's still a good mon overall. And we get Alolan Raichu in B. I mean, the competition for this mon is mostly base Raichu if we're thinking about it. Because Jolteon, you're not competing with that mon. So you look to your brother, and the thing Alolan Raichu has over it, there's 2. You've got Dual Stab, which is kind of cool. So you don't have to run Thunderbolt, you can run Psychic instead, or Psyshock. Psyshock being the bigger benefit, because you could, pop Blissey if you want to set up with this guy. And it's also a little tiny bit stronger. It's like 95 base special attack instead of 90, so not a ton better. But you might get some damage thresholds. I've not been too impressed by this mon yet, and I'm frankly not convinced it's much better than Raichu, like from Kanto, if it's any better. So, keep an eye on it. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll just stay terrible. Sableye in B+. I don't think it's that good, but I put it in B+, because originally people were trying to vote it into the A ranks, and I said no. Sableye is not that good, guys. The issue I have with Sableye is, again, just like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of dark types, and so Prankster feels wildly useless at times. Now, you can run double dark move on this. You can go, like, knock off, foul play, recover, and then just have Encore, maybe. And it kind of helps mitigate it a bit, because a lot of those dark types I mentioned, a lot of Sableye switch-ins in general, don't really want to be knocked. But I haven't felt it to be that great. I don't feel like without Passimian, it feels less needed to have that Ghost in the back, where you can just always blank CC spam. Though, it does remain an incredible, just shutdown, deterrent, whatever word you want to use there, for bulky setup sweepers, because you can encore them. Kind of sucks that Grim is so good right now. I would say that's the big limiting factor to Sableye. Grimmsnarl being debatably the best bulky setup mon in the tier. You kind of just lose to it very hard. I think if Grimmsnarl goes, Sableye probably jumps up a decent amount in viability, just because then the niche is a lot more profound for it. But yeah, Tauros, we go to him next. He's an A-. Speed tier is really, really good. And he is really strong. Like, Terra normal body slams just kind of living rent-free in the heads of many teams. But I think he does kind of struggle with what current balance such just non-offensive teams look like. A lot of these builds just naturally are so prepared for Tauros, because you'll have multiple of, like, Sandaconda, Sableye, Quillfish with Intimidate, general fast mons, even like Jolteon, Hisuian, Sneasel, Scarf, Mesprit. It just feels like builds, without even going out of their way, are generally pretty adept at taking on Tauros. And so, I expect this mon to get better over time, frankly, as teams maybe feel less inclined to check certain of these mons and stacking so many Sableye. Not Sableye checks, god no. So many of these Tauros checks. I think we'll probably see a point where Tauros is like A+, bordering on S, bordering on ban-worthy. But for now, I think it's just a solid option with a lot more room to grow. And then Weird Deer, I don't know how this mon got put in C+. People are on some massive copium. This guy sucks. He just sucks. Anyhow, now let's finally talk about the rises. Jolteon up to S-. This is kind of something that I pioneered for, because I think Jolteon is probably the most ban-worthy mon in the tier not named Grimmsnarl right now. I think Terra Ice just makes it very inconsistent to take on. I'll put it this way too. We could have Terra Preview in place as, you know, like a restriction from OU, right? Tell me what Terra Ice does, or tell me what knowing this mon is Terra Ice does for me. My Sandaconda still might get killed on any turn. It's not like I've got other options. You know, it's like my Appleton might still get tabled if I'm too haphazard with it. And I let the Jolteon Calm Mind and it just Terra Blast me. It doesn't really do a lot. A Terra Blast restriction would help, but, you know, I'm kind of just going to show, like, this mod is probably one of the best examples of a Terra user. It is, oh my god. Again, I'll reference the calc difference between HP Ice and Terra Blast Ice. You go from not even 2-hit KOing Sandaconda to just about always OHKOing Sandaconda. It's disgusting. And what are some other reasons to use it? Well, it's another Volt immunity. That's a huge one. We've even seen Terra Normal get use as like a Rotom counter, especially once, like, it was kind of near the end, I would say, of the previous meta, where Rotom was super, 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 super good. You could have Terra Normal with Silk Scarf Jolteon and just wall it forever. Use it as setup fodder if you needed, which is really, really cool. But it's a super fast mon, of course. We talked about the fastest unboosted mon in the tier. It does Calm Mind stuff super well because you're so fast as well. You don't fear nearly as much stuff revenge killing you. Because, like, what's contesting you? It's only going to be Scarfers. So you're thinking maybe like a Scarf Hisuian and Sneasel, maybe? Maybe a Scarf Scyther, but that's not too common. And then from there, I mean, the list isn't very long. Priority moves are scary, but, you know, if you're at full, you live at least one. And if we go to Scarf Rotom, well, you got Calm Mind Boost. That mon isn't revenge killing you. So it's kind of then limited to maybe some mons trying to play around you with Terra, like Appleton with Terra Steel, maybe. Even like a Lurantis or Bombardier, if they're Terra Electric, maybe they could try playing around you a little bit. But it's still pretty dangerous for him. And then Oricorio, little fire form back up to A+, because people have gone back to trying to break this Pokemon, and we're learning how to make this one look really absurd. People are more nowadays running one attack on it, so you'll go like Quiver Dance, Roost, Taunt, and then run Revelation Dance in my experience. Air Slash or Hurricane is fine too, depending on your Terra type. And yeah, they're having a lot of success. Of course, Revelation Dance is the very funny move with Terra because it, you know, you Terra into a Fairy type. Okay, now you have Terra Fairy. Or not Terra Fairy, you have Revelation Dance with the type of Fairy instead of being the type of Fire. Which is really weird to play around. And, you know, it's partly why Oricorio, Pom Pom, and Sensu both were banned, because yeah, all of a sudden a move of its changes typing too that's not Terra Blast? Ooh, kind of fancy. So that gets a little dicey. It's very versatile with its Terra types too. I could name like 5 off the dome that I see it use, like Grass, Electric, Ground, Fairy, Steel. We've seen all of those. So it does make it kind of hard to tell what exactly you want to respond to it with. And of course, as mentioned, since it runs Taunt so much right now, I mean, if you're Terra Fairy Taunt, you just beat up Appleton forever. The mon does not beat you down. You can even run, like, Terra Ghost even, I've theorized a little bit with Taunt to just make Blissy's life hell. Because I think at a point, you quiver up enough, it probably does not break your subs too consistently with Shadow Ball. And if you're taunting it, well, it can't, you know, try and boost alongside you, for example. Now, The problem with that set, what would it be? Well, you're not running Revelation Dance, because, wow, imagine tearing into a Ghost type and then being unable to beat the mon you're trying to counterattack. That'd be really sad, wouldn't it? But overall, you know, it's either Oricorio or Jolteon or, like, Grimmsnarl or Mesprit. I think those four are the best setup sweepers in NU right now. And you kind of just pick your poison between any of them, which one you want to use. And we get an Appleton Rise to A, with Vaporeon rising to RU. This kind of was a no-brainer, not because it's like Appleton was threatened by Vaporeon, but instead, we need bulky Pokemon to switch into Water-type attacks. Appleton is relatively okay at it. It's not even like we have a lot of Water-type attacks to switch into. I mean, we've got the very occasional Rain team, and then otherwise it's like Bruxish, which for some reason the people voted to drop, which my fellow voters play a different tier than me, clearly. But Appleton at least is nice to still have around for those attacks. You force them on like Bruxish to predict a lot more when you have an Appleton on your team, because they gotta maybe consider the Scyfangs then. So, overall, really good mon. Spec sets are also still really good. Also, eject pack sets are getting more use now with your Cycle even, and those are pretty cool as a pseudo-pivot kind of guy. I've been really fond of them. And then we got Hisuian Quillfish up to A. I would have had it in A+, if we still had Hoopa. I think, frankly, I might still have it in A+. But a Violite boosted bulk on this guy is quite nice. You can even check some Pokemon like Jolteon and Oricorio in a pinch if you must. Being a Dark type right now, plus a Poison type, is quite cool as well. You just check so many Pokemon through typing alone. You're looking at Cacturne, you're looking at Rotom, you're looking at... oh, what's the mons? Stuff like Grimm and Mesprit even. Because you can have, like, Taunt, you can have Haze. Of course, Barb Barrage is always threatening for them unless they're like Terra Steel. You're a great Spiker. It does so much stuff really well. I would definitely run it more if you haven't tried it out yet. Braviary up to A-. I had someone asking why Braviary rose to A- out of nowhere. And they think it's still bad. I'll put it this way. Braviary 1 was never bad. Braviary was always kind of criminally underranked because people didn't want to use it over Scyther. So it's one of those instances where, no, the mon isn't bad at all. It's just competition right now, or not right now, in the past was a lot rougher for Braviary to justify its use. Right now, though, I think people have kind of decided they don't want to run Defog on Scyther. They're like, hey, why would I run Defog when I go to SD Trailblaze? You know, people run away from that set, so they're like, okay, this one's just so much better, so I'm gonna run this set more often. So people then, of course, tend to look for a Defogger, and like, okay, well, I could run Lurantis, but Lurantis may be kind of too passive for my liking, so I'll run Braviary instead. I can pivot. This mon has really good stats, so it's kind of bulky out of nowhere when you invest in its HP. Able to take on a lot of, you know, Pokemon from full at least, and trade hits with them. So like a Tauros even you could trade hits with if you needed. I have Bruxish if it does not wave crash you into Oblivion. Technically you could trade hits with it as well. And then, of course, live I did with Joey a couple days ago with a Sky Attack Braviary. That set has seen actual use in tournaments. It's not just a meme set. I do want y'all to know. It is a legitimately pretty decent setup sweeper that, hey, respect them. Glaceon up to B+, frankly, I think you could even rise it further, but no steel types, no real great ice resist to speak of outside of, like, Appleton with Terra Steel. It's just a really good wall breaker, and I think having Abomasnow back is quite nice for it, because now you can get Ice Body to actually do something as an ability. Isn't that cool? You can even run Calm Mind to Glaceon under Snow, and it's not too bad. But you also get the defense boost, make it a little harder to revenge kill Glaceon. Not like it's hard to with a special attacker anyway. You got plenty of options. You got your Pyroars of the world, you got your Nasty Plot Croaks of the world, Houndoom even if you want to run a more niche Pokemon. Which is really funny that I mentioned Houndoom out of nowhere when we unranked it, but shh, it's okay. Overall, it's just really hard to switch into with any sort of consistency, and it's one of those mons that, yeah, your counterplay is denying it turns to hit you, basically. You gotta play really offensive against it. And hey, you better hope it doesn't tear on you. Or that if it does, you're still safe, right? Next up, Cloth to B. I couldn't tell you why Cloth rose to B. I would assume people are just trying it out as another Stealth Rock option. Because part of how you get meta development when stuff gets really stagnant is people just try stuff. So like Jolteon got a lot more use in part because, okay, people wanted to start building Sandaconda-less teams, and they still wanted a Volt Blocker. It's not like Conda was ever a great one, it's more just you could still go Sandaconda if you wanted to predict a Volt Switch and then pivot to another Pokemon if you needed. But so that's how Jolteon started getting used, because like, okay, well it's still a Volt Blocker, I could use Jolteon plus Chansey. And now Cloth maybe at least is getting some use for the same logic of, I don't want to use Sandaconda, so let's try Cloth. That's really all the rationale I have. At the very least, too, you could reference that it's a nice, bulky physical wall with your generator, so you could scout out stuff, say CB Grimmsnarl, you could scout out Tauros even if you need to. It's not like it's a bad Pokemon, it's just, I don't know why we're rising it to B, I don't think it's gotten any better. And you thought the video had been going on for a while, huh? Don't worry, some of these will be speedrun comments, because honestly, once we get down to like, here, I have nothing to say about these Pokemon. So don't worry. Anyhow, big drop. Eelektross from S out of the S rank entirely down to A+. This kind of reflects what I had mentioned in the Eel video. A mentality I don't necessarily agree with entirely, but I at least understand where they're coming from. Eelektross has a lot more competition as a bulky setup super now than it used to, with both Dunsparce and Grimmsnarl being so commonplace, in addition to even Coilconda. And combine that with Rotom's rise to the top of the tier, even though it's dropping a little bit too on the VR. Ignore that for now. It doesn't have that same niche now as also being just the dedicated Sandaconda abuser that a lot of people just throw on every team. And it didn't even have to be Coil back then, it could even just be Assault Vest. And you have Assault Vest Eel, you had that check to Oricorio forms back then, and whatever other miscellaneous special attackers like Zoroark. And you were feeling pretty good, because you had one Mon that could do a lot for your team. Nowadays, you don't need Eel to do all of that stuff. We have a lot more options that see overall use. You could run like Rotom plus Grimm, you could run Rotom plus Dodun. You don't even necessarily need Rotom. I feel like people in general aren't that worried about having a complete Sandaconda slammer either. So they're kind of just disregarding that as a specific slot they need. But yeah, Eel's, I think, also viewed as being kind of Terra dependent to a bit too much of a degree. Because a lot of the time it's kind of not that bulky. It's kind of not that strong relative to these other options. It's like Drain Punch is what you have to use for recovery. You don't have Rest like a Conda would. You don't have Roost like a Dunsparce would. I feel like it's got a lot of these like minor nuisances working against it compared to its competition, which has, you know, in the eyes of the voters, it's knocked it down a peg. Still a fantastic Mon again. Per the video we did a couple days ago. Go watch that. Eel is still him. He is still Himothy. But, you know, falling a little bit tougher at times. And then we got Rotom also falling S-. I don't know why. I think part of it's just dark types are everywhere. Like Grimmsnarl specifically is the huge one, I would say. And, you know, when you got some of these mons like Grimm, Bombardier, Hisuian Quill, I'm trying to think of other ones, but there's so many dark types, it's hard to remember them all. It makes it hard for Rotom to ever really want to lock into Shadow Ball and start just trying to weaken teams, often relegating it to a Volt Switch spamming role, which, God, do you want to get caught volting on a Jolteon? Not really. It's not as easy to just guarantee mileage with anymore. And it's, I think, just a lot more easily punished because of, again, dark types are so commonplace. Mons in general that punish it for its choice scarf set locking into basically any move are so commonplace that, still a wonderful Mon, just, it doesn't feel as free, I guess is a way to say. I felt like we had a good period of maybe a month or two where Rotom you could put on any team and run whatever set you felt you needed, and there wasn't really a ton your opponent could do. Just doesn't feel like we're in that same spot now. Now this is a drop, like I mentioned earlier, I have no clue why. Why are we voting Bruxish down when Vaporeon, one of the few mons that could try and pretend to be a check to it, left the tier? I don't know. My assumption is people believe the tier is increasingly fast, and so they're voting Bruxish down because it's, you know, it's not a slow Mon, but it's in that kind of weird congested speed tier area around Rotom and Oricorio. And so people just don't feel it's as oppressive, even with Vapo leaving. That's all I could say about Brooks. I think it's still incredible. Cacturn dropping 2, I think, again, this kind of just comes down to Dark-type competition. Even Grass-type competition, with Appleton getting so much more use. You know, Appleton's a really, really good alternative. In many ways, it's a little bit better, I would say, than Cacturn. Muck dropping, I kind of don't know why Muck is dropping. I also, though, couldn't tell you the last time I saw Muck getting much use in tournament play, so sure, there's part of it. Ursaring dropping because, you know, Blissey does eat into its niche as just that general fat special sponge. And again, you'll see a lot of these tier shifts are as a result of, hey, bulky setup sweeper is worse because Grimmsnarl is around now and is better bulky setup sweeper. That's kind of part of why Ursaring dropped too. I just don't think it's nearly as good as it used to be because Grimmsnarl is as good as it is. Mesprit is as good as it is. Even Dodun's sparse. Even though Dodun has been incredible for the entire time Ursaring's been at the top of the tier. It's also just pretty Terra reliant, whereas something like Grimm I don't think is nearly as reliant on Terra. Even something like Mesprit doesn't feel as reliant on Terra. Because, I mean, you'll often want a Terra Fairy, because you want to make sure Draining Kiss is not, you know, the equivalent of beating someone over the head with a wet paper towel. I don't know. Ursaring just feels a lot more vulnerable defensively to Pokemon that may try and revenge kill some of these options. You know, you're thinking about Hazel, Toxicroak, Paldean Tauros. Good revenge killers. I'll beat up Ursaring unless it can Terra Fairy. And we got Drifblim. I feel like it's been falling off for a while now. Defog sets are really, really exploitable. As I've mentioned in the past, they're very passive and often only have like one attack, one status move as their way of dissuading stuff from coming in. And now they're still useful because Will-O-Wisp Drifblim is really good against just about every bulky setup sweeper. I feel like other than Mesprit and Grimm, it can kind of do well against everything. It's not like the most consistent of matchups against some of these guys. You know, something like an Electros, you could Wisp it though. So like a Dodun, you could Wisp it. Sandaconda is a little more unclear, because you could still Wisp a Sandaconda that's Coil. But from there, it's like, okay, well, it's got Shed Skin. How long is it going to actually stay burned for? So it's not the best matchup imaginable. You know, I don't know. I don't have a ton to add on Drifblim. I haven't been a fan of it personally in a while, so I'm a little biased against it already from the get-go. Haunter drops. As we mentioned, if you're a Ghost type, you're probably a little bit worse right now because of the Grimmsnarl meta. You know, even Dunsparce being so prevalent, yeah, you could Sludge Bomb it, but it's just another one that means you can't spam Shadow Ball. Dark types in general, basically. Any Ghost type that dropped, just assume it's because Dark types are good. And yes, I know some of my rationale for these drops isn't that, like, insightful, but if you look at Togeki's, it's not like there's a lot more. There's not like there's a lot more, you know? We're both of us are basically just kind of like, you know, who cares? Pyroar drops, again, I kind of agree with what we briefly saw down there. There's just more, even if Vaporeon is gone, you would think Pyroar would be a lot better. We actually just have more overall responses to it now. Like, Pyroar is not beating Blissey. It's just not. Even if you think Terra Ghost, a lot of Blissey just have Shadow Ball by default because they do not want Substitute Nasty Plot Rotom to run a train on them. So that's not really a good countermeasure. They still have Seismic Toss too, so it's not like, oh, well, if they're Shadow Ball, they can't hit me originally. No, they still can. I mean, if they couldn't, they'd have T-Wave, so don't worry. So, you gotta deal with Blissey, you gotta deal with Applesy, you still gotta deal with all of the offensive Pokemon too. Pyroar is in that great speed tier spot, remember, because it's actually faster than Scyther, but you still gotta deal with regular Tauros, you still gotta deal with Hisui and Sneasel, you still gotta deal with Jolteon. You know, you're still not in the best of places. Paldean Tauros, combat form drops. I don't actually agree with this. I think this mon is an obscenely good setup sweeper. Though the drop of Mesprit, I would say, is actually kind of big. And, I mean, technically, if you like regular Tauros, you literally can't run them both, so there's literal competition for the Tauros slot. So there's that. I also say this mod is pretty reliant on Terra itself, and if a mod is a little too overly reliant on Terra, I do think that overall caps its ceiling a little bit. You could argue that for Jolteon above. In my experience, I just haven't found this mod to actually be reliant on Terra. Or at least super reliant, I should say, on Terra in games I've played. I think with Jolteon, there's a difference between it and something like Paldean Tauros, where the threat level of this mon using its Terra, it's reliant on Terra to cover weaknesses defensively a lot of the time. Jolteon's reliant on Terra to actually one-tap a lot of the stuff that's scared of being one-tapped. But that threat of being able to flip the tables on something like Sandaconda or Cacturne or Appleton so significantly, I feel like the threat alone gives it so much usefulness is just scare factor. People will play so much more differently against the Jolteon that can Terra than they will the Paldean Tauros that can Terra. I think that makes sense. And so, something that may be a shortcoming for Paldean Tauros, I just don't think really is one at all for Jolteon. So that's where I would draw a bit of a line in the sand to differentiate the two. Umbreon drops to A-. It's been kind of for a while. People aren't really too high on Wish Pass teams. I think often they're just viewed as being a little too slow in nature. Umbreon also just, no toxic means this mon is quite passive. And Dark types, we've mentioned 50 times, there's a lot of them, so Umbreon's slot is kind of contested off rip. I would say the big one too for it, not being able to effectively deter a lot of the current bulky setup supers because they'll run Terra Fairy so frequently. You could still get a T-Wave off on them, but since we're talking about Terra Fairy mons, you can think about like Grim. Grim can always just sub up. Mesprit can turn into a Fairy type and just start Calm Minding. Something like Dunsparce can do the same. Even Electros or Sandaconda can do the same. It just makes Umbreon so much more vulnerable to getting kind of just sat on when it's supposed to be sitting on opponents. Chansey drops down to C. Again, Blissey is just a 1-to-1 better version of it. I think keeping it in C... I actually voted to unrank it, though I will say, I think keeping it in C is okay. There is still something to say about the fact it is technically bulkier. Even though Boots Blissey is actually bulkier when you start looking at what happens when you're switching into hazards, the raw bulk of Chansey is something to examine past that initial turn. And hey, who's to say you can't run them both? Please don't. NDD F drops, it's just never been that good. In theory, it should be better than it is, but I think since Inu's got so many special walls that are everywhere, NDD F's struggling bulk in a meta dominated by dark types, and still to an extent ghost types, and in any mod being able to Terra Steel out of nowhere, or even Terra Dark if you want to reference, say, like Muck, or as I've seen ZS run, Sandaconda with Terra Dark. Those kind of put constraints on a mon like NDD, where it really has one move it wants to spam a lot, and starts looking a lot weaker when it can't throw off that powerful Psychic Terrain boosted move. And we got Mabosstiff. It keeps dropping because, wow, why would I use a Pokemon to try and... that is based around forcing switches to do its damage, if these Pokemon have no inclination to switch because they can instead just turn into a Fairy type? That's really just been Mabosstiff's issue the entire generation. And it's not like I got CB Grimmsnarl if I want. I could even run Offensive Bombardier if I want, and I'm more convinced by these Pokemon as offensive options. Both of those could pivot too, by the way. So they're just better. I'm sorry, but Mabosstiff is a very strong Pokemon. It's a great example of something where I think if it fell to PU right now, it'd probably get banned very quickly. Though I could be entirely wrong on that. It's just not that good. Not that good. Use the other Darks. And we got Hisuian Slagoo falls from B+ to B-. I am taking full credit for the fact this one was even ever B+ to begin with. It's suffering like Yule from, hey, we have so many bulky setup sweepers, but then you gotta analyze with Hisuian Slagoo, why would I run it to begin with? There's a lot fewer reasons to. Obviously, it's a natural steel type. Contrast that with Eel, which has to use Terra to become a steel type. I would ask you to tell me why that matters too much right now. Does it do anything a steel type needs to? Kind of, it checks normal types and flying types, but we don't have a ton of those. So it's not as profound a use. And then you're looking at ice types, well, Glaceon will probably be two-shotting you. So that's fun, and you're not doing anything back to it. Don't lie, you're not. Iron Head does not do damage. Stop that. Veluza drops to B. I don't know why. I don't know why. You really reliant on using Fillet Away? It always was. This is just a change I wholly disagreed with this and saw no reason for it to happen, so yeah. Kamala to C+, because turns out this mon that people thought might be too OP for NU because of Terra is actually really awful. So we got rid of it. Oh, Houndoom wasn't unranked. We just dropped it to C. Okay. Yeah, Houndoom's in C because why would I use it over Pyroar or any Dark-type Wall Breaker? The appeal to it, in theory, would be Dual Stab is really good. Like, you look at our tier, not much wants to take on the Dual Stab. Nasty Plot is a nice benefit over Pyroar, so you could break past maybe some of these Pokemon like Blissey or Appleton. It just sits at such a meh speed tier. And I'd rather an Oricorio if I wanted to set up sweeping Fire type, or I'd rather run like Grimmsnarl for a Dark type that's set up sweeping. It's just in a very weird middle ground spot. We got Leafeon drops to C+. It was originally risen, or ranked I think even, to B- for its role on an HO team. But I think HO just doesn't see a lot of use right now, so people are less inclined to leave Leafeon too high. Also, this mod is literally forced to Terra to do anything. It's not like Jolteon, where it's still utility beyond Terra Ice, Terra Blast. No, this mod, if you're not Terra Firing, you're doing nothing. Raichu drops to C+. I could see Raichu bouncing between C+ and B- for the next 50 slates. That wouldn't shock me. So I don't have a ton to say here. It's just Jolteon is a better version of Raichu, and having a Alolan Raichu around now at least is like, there's some semblance of competition there too, because it's the same speed tier. And very, very exact, like, similar roles when you're talking about sets that they run. In my experience, I've seen a lot of the same, like, Draining Kiss Terra Fairy stuff on each of them. So, reading that what you will. I think it still does what it does fine enough. Thwackey to C+, until grassy terrain becomes super commonplace, I don't think Thwackey will be too highly ranked. So that's really all I have to comment there. Charizard to C, because again, this is a hyper offense Pokemon just about exclusively, and unless we start seeing more belly drum acrobatics stuff out of it, probably will never be that good. Crocolore down to C, it could probably be unranked entirely right now, it's really funny. This mon was originally relevant because of Stall being good in the first 2 weeks of the tier. Stall fell off, and it very slowly dropped down the VR. And now, when Stall is finally good again, Crocolore drops further because it's not actually being used with Stall anymore, because it's not that good. God, that is really funny. Poor guy. I remember people being unsure if Crocolore would even drop to NU because it was being used in RU a decent bit at the time. And yeah, it just never really got that good of a footing in NU. Turns out, when you don't have much hazard control, and you're weak to every kind of hazard, and also can't hold leftovers or boots because you have to be a Violite, not a recipe for success. No. Next up, Skuntank unranked, because can you tell me seriously the last time you faced a Skuntank and felt threatened by it? There's nothing it does better than any other poison or dark type. Spiritomb drops because Sableye is around now, and that is very, very direct competition. You talk about really specialized defensive utility. I mean, they're the same typing, they switch into the same Pokemon. Spiritomb, of course, retains some relevant niche because of Calm Mind sets. Crotomb, for the Pokemon terminology inclined. Crotomb is a very old set that this thing has run for probably over a decade at this point. And so that's why we still have it ranked, because you could very easily run it over Sableye. on a stall build if you wanted, and have a bulky setup sweeper. Would also let you run something else on Blissey. You could run Blissey as like a cleric instead of maybe wanting it to also have Calm Mind, but yeah, probably will be unranked in the near future. Vespiquen, I'm so sorry. We had a whole video as to why you're finally a good Pokemon, and now you're unranked. Yeah, it turns out Vespiquen, once there's better competition at the forefront of the tier, not that good of a Pokemon. Zangoose has not been good in Inu, ever. It's not worth running. It's a bad sweeper. It's not that strong as a breaker either, as you're just not beating past the most common physical walls with any consistency. Also, Lamau, you give Barb Barrage on Quillfish that power boost just by default. It does not have to spend turns trying to hit you with Barb Barrage to get the boost by poisoning you. No, you poison yourself. Good work. Good work, chap. Basculin's unranked. Why am I using Basculin? I could use Bruxish. And in Rotom Fan is unranked, because why am I using Rotom Fan? I could use regular Rotom. Or Rotom Frost. There's no niche. There's nothing. There's nothing there. And of course, you're weak to rocks. You can't run Boots because you're probably Scarf. And if you're Boots, why am I running this over something else that is better? You know, no Pain Split really hurts this Pokemon. It just doesn't do any of the defensive stuff you'd want it to. And even if you could run Boots, I'm not convinced that this mod actually would be checking things like Croak and Hazel all that well because of Terra. But I hope y'all enjoyed this VR coverage. As I said, theirs is a huge shift, but I like the VR. I think it's looking real nice right now. Just a little brief overview real quick. Here's our S rank. Very powerful assortment of Pokemon here. And you can just go down very slowly. It's what we got going. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. Expect more PS Lives in the near future, as those are what I love doing the most. And I will see y'all next time. Peace.